Welcome to Compost the Empire, the podcast. This is a podcast where decolonial visions and stories are nurtured by the compost of a dying empire.
We're not here to offer hot takes or polished answers. We're here to sit inside the questions modernity refuses to metabolize, exploring grief, imagination, power, embodiment, liberation, and what comes after collapse.
Each episode is an invitation into slow thinking, relational inquiry, and remembering ways of being that were never meant to survive inside extractive systems, but somehow did. Welcome to the ecosystem.
Where we walk each other home.
Welcome to Compost the Empire. I'm Lugina.
And I'm Ethos.
This is episode 1, Breaking the Spell of the Empire, How Neurocolonization Shapes Our Bodies, Bonds, and Beliefs. Before we get started, I'm going to share an excerpt from this beautiful eco-futurist prayer from the book Body Autonomy, Decolonizing Sex Work and Drug Use, put together by Justice Rivera, written by Ismail Laredo Ali and Paula Graciela Avila Khan. Dear ancestors of the multiverse, from void to stardust and everything in between, we who have explored consciousness for time immemorial, through evolutions of organic and crystalline molecular metastructures, generations of experimental play, intentional ceremony, and remedies of relief, pray for healing of the past, present, and future. We pray for grounded and guided initiations and interspecies awakenings that recondition fixations on domination, punishment, and profit, a mass transition where rituals of reckoning and ceremonies for repair halt cycles of harm and spark cycles of healing. May your magic open portals of love, truth, and creation for maximum favorable phenomena. May we weave the learnings from this experience into reverence for the essential elements that sustain life.
And so it is. Thank you for that beautiful prayer. And I'm really excited for today's episode. I mean, like every episode, I'm probably going to be excited for, but we're going to really break down like what is empire from our perspective. What we're realizing that through understanding the operating system of neurocolonization and then applying Michael Yellowbird's work of neurodecolonization and somatic work and somatic abolitionism is that we can actually start creating prefigurative politics in our organizing and community building and culture building by rendering empire obsolete and just being done with it. And the only way that we can do that is by coming here and having creative conversations. And that's exactly what we're hoping to do here today.
Yes, absolutely. In focusing on what we want to deconstruct, it's critical to keep our creative focus and our attention, our precious attention on what we want to replace it with and what we want to co-create it with, and how that's not a binary journey, but a constant ebb and flow. And
It's funny that you mentioned journey because I wrote a spoken word piece about that, and I love to share that before we get going into the theoretical to kind of like get us into the moment. So, y'all ready? I wrote this in August of 2017, so that means that I wrote it literally around the time where I was having this crazy like LSD experience, and having my spiritual awakening at surprise, surprise, Burning Man. You know, the typical path of Burning Man, awakening you. All right, here we go. I am constantly reflecting on a society that was created not for me. I'm constantly reflecting on a culture that rejects differences and complexities. I am constantly reflecting on a country who has become so divisive and elusive that no one can tell their heads from their asses. Murder and death, the only thing anyone can grasp, is only right below their own noses. Don't they recognize that there's a whole world of color, intersectionality, love, creation? So who is to say that love should be lived in a particular way? Who said that my body has to be dictated by a world that doesn't even value the body and of its essence and its spirit? That everything is outside the self. How can we understand that there are as many minds as there are persons but cannot reflect that philosophy when it comes to the interactions amongst each other, who said that I had to express myself in only mannerisms that were created as a social norm to oppress the poor and the enslaved, so they would not feel empowered to rise against the bourgeoisie, to create and expand their power that they didn't even know that they had. Who says that I have to be one way and that my love and attraction has to be that of this other way? Why would I want anyone to set such limitations of universal language of love, individual freedom? I have lived in a world in which I felt like I was a part of Shakespeare's A Midsummer's Night Dream. I felt like I was a part of Shakespeare's A Midsummer's Night Dream, waking in a haze, unable to tell reality from my own and from everyone else's. I lay fast asleep in a hazy, foggy dream of misperception, miscommunication, oppression. A world full of taking but never giving, always destroying but never creating. When are we going to wake up from our hazy dreams? We only have this life to live, but our innate responsibility is to ensure that the future generations have this earth to call their home, to enjoy the wind rustle through the treetops that soar higher than any skyscraper ever could, to find solace of the feeling the millions of trillions of grains of sand between their toes, to feel the love between the sun and the moon as the crashing of the waves onto and taking them away again, creating a symphony of solace. When are we going to wake up out of our hazy dreams and enter a stream of consciousness, awokeness to the violence that is continuously being perpetuated through language, law systems and institutions, toxic gender norms, sexuality standards, a life of black and white, valuing of materials, and a piece of paper a government dictates as value? A society that dictates it as happiness. When are we going to wake up out of our hazy dreams and be able to realize that all that is wrong with the macrocosm can only change from the microcosm? The less self reflective, self loving, self caring, self educating, self thinking, the more society will create those who rely on temporary materials for false, permanent happiness. But those that have awoken from this hazy dream called the American dream understand what I do now, that the society world culture was not created for us, for the poor, the queers, the nerds, the goths, the empaths, the connected, the artists, the creatives, the freaks, women, people, or color, anything that isn't cisgendered, heteronormative, white, and male. The society was not created for you and I, but that doesn't mean we cannot start creating society in which we want to be a part of. In a world so imbalanced, our actions and words will fill the space that is being left by the past. It is our choice of how we're going to bring balance. Will we learn? Will we strive to bring higher vibrations to the yin in a world full of yang, art, music, meditation, yoga, breath, or continue to stamp out corporate capitalism of advertisements to spend what we do not have? To speak with aggression, rushing through, creating duality, divisiveness, and never dialoguing because we are told we are two instead of one. Are we going to continue? Or are we going to end a cycle of continuous violence? The choice is ours, and the choice of neurocolonization is what will bring balance to the world of darkness. Love work that enables and actualizes each other's ideas, hopes, and dreams. Love work to guide each other to learn that we're all creators through movement, poetry, music, and art. Love work that shows that we are Buddhas, gods, and goddesses, and goddesses, and deities, and the divine. Love work to show that our flames are a Mother Earth. We are only one and only one after we say hello and face our shadows and the darkness and the denser vibrations that once served us for protection, but no longer advocates for the world we want to create. The choice is ours. And what choice are we going to make? Thank you all for bearing with me on that. And so I think this like goes into, well, I guess we should, I don't know. I'm like, move on from that, stop perceiving me. But yeah, thank you all for listening to some of my poetry I wrote almost 10 years ago.
Thank you so much for sharing. It resonates so deeply and really gets at all the different multifaceted layers that are still core to reimagining liberation and, waking up from this dream, and reclaiming our perception of our own reality and what is possible. Going through these cycles of existential dread and dejectedness when you start to wake up, and then the next phase, which is, we don't have to accept this. And um, I really appreciate you putting words to that and sharing it and how it sets the stage for conversation today.
And it like I think it brings up like a perfect quote from literally one of my core um teachers through his books and writings, and that's Paulo Freire. And he writes in Pedagogy of the Press, quote, "Human existence cannot be silent, nor can it be nourished by false words, but only true words, with which men and women transform the world. To exist humanely is to name the world, to change it. Once named, the world in its turn reappears to the namers as a problem and requires of them a new naming. Human beings are not built in silence, but in word, in work, and in action reflection." End quote. And I think like that then like leads to, something that I'm calling empire with a little e, because I'm personally not beyond bullying fascists, and empire is fascist, and they aren't. I'm sorry, but if you look at our current administration, they definitely are not empire with the big E. They're definitely empire with a little e. So look at this current administration. It's just like it's like mediocrity across the board, and the only way that you got there is because white supremacy exists. And like, you know, people like to talk about BDE and alpha males, like they're obsessed with it over there. But in
Mm.
reality, those of us that sit in a sacred masculinity, or like are like really comfortable with our masculinity, it's just like you don't need to announce it to the world when you got it. You just exist in it. It's like
I think that the shadow aspects of you know, yeah, all of these aspects of empire are being amplified right now. And no, I mean it's the insecurity is so deep, and it's important to find the levity in it alongside the horror and its implications. Um I was on a podcast and I talked about phantom dick as a concept, and then I realized it was actually big clit energy, and that all of this is energetic, and that's what I've been feeling in my experiences. I would like to challenge the mainstream of big dick energy as how we refer to energetic power, because if anything, the big clit energy is the underdog. You don't see it coming. You don't see it. The power really lies within the power of creation. But I don't even think that breaking these down as a binary is the path. But I I do think that right now the end phases of patriarchy as embedded with empire, um, it's dying out, it's losing power, and it's lashing out in all these ways. So yeah, I think we should start, BCE, because the clit is not
BCE.
small. BCE.
And we can thank trans men for furthering progression of scientific discovery of how many nerves exist at the end of the clit, for donating their tissue as they get bottom surgery. Way to go, trans men.
Yes. Yes. And yeah, I literally just had two different events called Clit Miss Cheer that were like educational campaigns about the clit. So you could look into that work as well. But I think that yeah, like what is it that's so threatening, and how is this tied into um everything that we're unlearning and resisting? Yeah.
So can I share like a definition that I actually wrote, I'd say like 5 years ago? I think it fits perfectly, and it really sums it up.
Yes.
Okay. So empire with the little e, little LDE. I'm sorry. I think myself laugh today. With a little e is the overarching culture and society that dominates the approved way the majority of the imperialized and colonized world function, behave, operates, perceives reality, and understands ourselves and others around us. empire with a little e creates constant dualities that are often in opposition or in battle of power amongst one another, often and usually better or more approved than the other, creating an oppressive power dynamic. This is a strategic move by the bourgeoisie because it pits the human species to divide each other based off of differences instead of unifying together based off of appreciation for the diversity of the human species. The main purpose is divide human beings for the determination of power and domination of the status quo. If the elite minority make rich cisgender heteronormative white males the the cookie cutter esque requirement acceptable and successful standards that are unobtainable and only reached by a small amount of the world, including a majority of those white cisgendered people. Ultimately, this strategy is a major con, scam, manipulation, gaslighting, abuse by the 1% of the world's population in order to hoard, steal, and maintain their billions and trillions while leaving literal pennies for the rest of the 99% to fight and oppress each other for.
Hmm. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Damn.
Well, there you have it. And I think like what's interesting is like the maturation of like my work in particular and like my path has been to like really break down like the infrastructure and the architecture of the operating system of empire. And this year while I was facing around 19 months of state repression for my work for Palestine. um, I needed to distract myself because truthfully my mental health was not doing well and I was like on the verge of collapse like in a way that I've never experienced before in my entire life. And I've been through the dark. And that's when I realized like there's this operating system that I've coined now called neurocolonization.
Hmm. I mean, your post on neurocolonization is when I first reached out because I think that those of us who wake up to this and then try to make change on different levels or different avenues usually find, the whether that's electoral politics or like the nonprofit industrial complex, like find the door slammed in our face, like when we realize how much some of this social justice language is performative. And I think that for me, after like a decade of trying to make change in that way and then feeling like it was futile, it came down to and then reconciling with my own nervous system and relating in different ways and living out my values. I think that um neurocolonization and neurodecolonization as an intervention is the ultimate upstream intervention to both well-being and liberation, and it really is like grassroots, literally on the level of our neural pathways, going outward and realizing that we can't do it alone, and that our nervous systems and our the way that we interact with the world is not individual, it's not isolated, it's collaborative, it's co-created in the same way that um, our attachment styles are mirrored and built out through our initial relationships. So I think this is a really brilliant and necessary paradigm, and I'm really looking forward to exploring how it threads together all of the different, um, you know, repercussions of resistance. Yeah.
And I love and I want to like piggyback off of what you just said here, and particularly that something that I'm arguing in this book that I'm so blessed that Legina decided to co-author with me, called Chasing Consciousness, Rating Spirit, Somatics, and Liberation Through a Queer Cosmology in a Dying Empire. Something that we're trying to demonstrate there through understanding and naming neurocolonization is essentially that, and also under and redefining consciousness and redefining what we understand as intelligence, is that consciousness in itself has been defined as like something from the individuation of self and from one sole human being in particular, that the dominating stereotype of what is an elite human or a supreme human being, which we know is white supremacy, that the rest of us don't have as much consciousness or intelligence based off of the Cartesian duality that mind over matter of intelligence is superior, or like like your brain is your only intelligent operating system. And through land-based spiritualities, and particularly that of Native American culture and indigenous spiritualities, which I call metabolic spiritualities, is that that's not true. That is complete illusion to create separation based off of like the cosmological seed of separability that is implanted in this entire culture and society of what Vanessa Machado de Oliveira calls modernity. And I think like the point that I'm getting at is that consciousness expansion can't just exist within just by ourselves, especially in the day and age of technology that has connected us together in a way that is like insane and also can be dangerous, as we've seen, because mirror technology does that, mirrors the user. and and essentially like we have to redefine consciousness expansion as relational, and this is where I appreciate you, Gina, coming in and saying yes to being a part of this, because I personally don't, I have so much relational trauma that I haven't been able to fully explore the expansion of consciousness in my intelligent pathways through a relationship and a level in which you have engaged, to where it's like it's your genius, it's your passion. And I think like that leads me to like I would love for you to like tie in attachment theory and like this work with neurocolonization and neurodecolonization, and just like bring us on a TED talk, bring us on a journey, because your mind is your brilliant work is needs to be shared.
Thank you for that, and you as well. I think that yeah, felt so inspired by this weaving, and I would love to expand on the question, what was brought up, and it's very meta, right? Because through relationship, we are further integrating and expanding on these concepts about relationships and consciousness. Um, so I would say I want to frame this by explaining why I started on this quest of wanting to understand um, the relationship between attachment theory and our nervous systems and somatic co-regulation. A few years ago, I decided to intentionally pursue non-monogamy after many years of messy love triangles and really like denying my own queerness and non-monogamy. And I was like, okay, I've like expanded through research. I know what I'm doing, and then I started to experience something called attachment panic, and I realized how deeply codependent I um, I was. Which codependency as a pattern of behaviors that are all rooted in how we find our ways toward how our body tries to orient towards safety and towards attunement, and I really went on a quest. I found Polysecure. I found um, all of the other foundational texts, which we'll go into. But to tie it back, understanding that um, I had an attachment to myself, which was a core part of this, and I had been socialized to, like many of us, to look for our other half. That the epitome of joy and completion is a single romantic and sexual relationship, and realizing um, I had to retrain my nervous system to find safety within myself, and then also in experiencing complex relational networks and systems, there would be this, and building on Jessica Fern's book around um, like nodes of attachment, I realized how much I was dysregulated by those around me, and non-monogamy gave me a framework or permission to talk about this in ways where I couldn't before in a monogamous paradigm, because um, emotional boundaries are expected. There's a concept of emotional cheating there, and suddenly I was in this free relating space where everything was having an impact. So I think that, and I had felt a lot of shame around my anxious attachment at the beginning, and then learning frameworks like from Healing the Schisms of the Self by Janina Fisher that all of these attempts to co-regulate are ingenious adaptation strategies. Both anxious attachment and avoidant attachment are ways of getting our needs met. They're strategies in environments where there is a lack of attunement and abundance, whether that's anxious attachment reaching out or avoidant attachment pulling away. So it's like, okay, secure attachment, what is that? And how does that tie into like both my nervous system and also how I'm wired to relate. And I think that as we undo like the harm of hyper individualism, as you were saying, and realizing that like we can be parts of networks where needs are met in teams of people and groups of people rather than on our own, is so key. And also, um, I realized being in Egypt, and like reading Polysecure at the same time that there is such a thing as codependence in groups of people where people are dysregulated if people are too far seeking out their independence. We can mirror the ways that ecosystems function around um, how attention is distributed and how you know co-regulation is possible in a way that isn't self-destructive, where we can settle down into ease, um, and redirect our attention towards things that we would be distracted from otherwise. So I'll wrap this up by saying that empire really benefits from codependency, from this horrible trick that the answer lies outside of ourselves, with one particular person instead of ourselves and a community being a core part of that interconnectedness and autonomy. I also am curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I think I need a second to like metabolize
Okay.
and to like really digest and chew on like everything that you just said. So like what I'm hearing, I'm gonna reflect to the best of my ability. And I wrote notes. I'm in class. We're in class over here, okay? Like I'm taking notes, I'm highlighting, and there's questions. So like what I'm hearing, like you have this thing that I don't know if you coined it or like you probably read it somewhere, and it was like there's this attachment panic, and like through that anxious attachment, and I've dove in pretty deep into my own attachment actually from my complex PTSD in my childhood and having like significant amount of ACEs. I have a disorganized attachment, and I've been working really hard to build secure attachment responses, which is actually how I understand and feel somatically about the process of neurodecolonization, which something that you also said is like, how do we feel interdependent and like, what does that feel like somatically? And I think that's like, I texted you about that the other day, and I was like, well, what does it feel like to attach? What does attachment feel like somatically? And for me, it feels like gripping, like kind of suffocating, versus like if I'm in this really secure attached relationship, it feels like there's breath and there's space and there's like room, I don't know how else to describe it. And then what I'm also hearing is that what I really liked is this idea of body orienting towards safety, because as a paramedic, I've studied A&P and pathophysiology in order to do my job and to do it well. And I always talk about how we're always chasing homeostasis. And I think like that body orienting towards safety is the same kind of thing, which is why I dive deep into like neurotransmitters and as neurospirituality and this neurocolonization and the way that it affects our neurotransmitters, which I believe is like a place for um consciousness expansion and whatnot. But then you talk to something that like challenges me a little bit around like the other half and soulmate and stuff like that. And I do believe like some indigenous spiritualities do believe like you do have another half. But what I'm hearing is like through empire and through this cosmological idea of separability, we created a relationship hierarchy that deems like this romantic Disney-esque wannabe abusive relationship disguised as love, because that's what we're oriented towards before we were even born, in this current paradigm that we're in, that 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 could be destructive to your relationships and putting pressure on, and I have personal experience. But if you can you decolonize that idea of other half or like other one and maintain, that. So that's like a question that I have. And like, is that possible or is it not? And I think it is. I think so, because I just can't, it's just something that I haven't been able to move. I'm just like, for me, if I'm going to connect, particularly let someone, so my one of my mentors has this idea of rings, and people belong in different rings in your life. I have my inner circle, and in order for people to get into my closer rings, I'm looking for something that feels so cosmologically deep that like it seems like we signed a contract together before we arrived here. And how do we decolonize that? So these are my, and then one more thing that I highlighted here, that I wrote, if I could read my fucking chicken scratch, says co-regulation and genius adaptation strategies. And I think that leads us to like something I'm really excited about is like we have this workshop series that we're about to launch at the end of this episode, actually, where it's like how can unwinding neurocolonization help you recognize love. And I know you have issue with this, but like my Little Prince is a saboteur, and how do I not sabotage it when it's there, right? Um,
Hmm.
that's what I got. That's my reflections for you for what you just shared.
Um,
Did I do good?
yes.
Did I get
Yes,
a
yes.
gold
Thank you for
star?
gold
Dopamine.
star. Great job. Yeah, I definitely have a couple of things to say in response. I want to share one of my favorite metaphors for relating, which is trees. And one time I came across codependence as two trees growing into each other, inhibiting growth, and as opposed to interdependence or differentiation, which is two trees growing around each other and exchanging nutrients and growing even taller than they would in isolation.
Energetic resonance. That's what I call it.
Yes. So I think that, I mean, also like the other half perspective, if you zoomed out, and kind of looked at two wholes coming together to create, to amplify and expand, that's also a valid perspective. And, as I've been exploring different kinds of partnership and different kinds of love, I've been, solo poly now since July. And
What
before
does
that, I
that
was
mean?
It means that I'm polyamorous and I'm not, I don't have like a nesting partner or an anchor partnership.
What does
I
that
have,
mean? You got to break these down for those of
so,
us new over here.
so, anchor partnership is an alternative to the language of like primary partner. And it's like a relationship that it really like anchors you down, is more of like a constant, plays a bigger role in your life, versus like a nesting partnership is like living with someone and creating like a nest with one another. And I was in a 3-year relationship with someone where I was polyamorous, but we were living together. And so I've been experimenting. I have like all types of different kinds of relationships that fulfill different needs with, and they ebb and flow. And to me, it feels like an ecosystem of connection where all my different parts are nourished, in that capacity. And so, but realizing like there is no cookie cutter approach that applies to anyone, and that's the violence of like, mononormativity, or like a set of beliefs around what love and a relationship should look like. I know that for me, when the other half narrative in my life came across as like I can't be okay without this person, or like, I, in terms of like co-regulating or a sense of purpose or a sense of well-being. Like I think, for me, secure self-attachment is like I'm good no matter what. Things can enhance my life, things can expand my life, but I don't need this other person to live. Like look at we're taught like I read Romeo and Juliet when I was 14 years old, and also like Juliet wants to die when she can't be with Romeo anymore, and he's exiled, like he's still alive. And these are the narratives that we're taught about true love. So it's more so like a rejection of that, and releasing love as a means of control, and inhibiting our agency, and rather something that can expand, our autonomy and agency, where we're not putting all our cups, all our eggs, I guess what's the expression, our eggs in one basket. And that's just like a more adaptive, strategic way of approaching like co-regulation and being well, because then I know that like when I need to step away and take care of myself or focus on something else, and I can't be as present in a relationship, that the people, the person slash people I love are going to be okay and have other people they can regulate with, instead of it being solely my job. So I'm not someone's other half. I'm part of a beautiful like fractal of puzzle pieces that are constantly shifting and ebbing and flowing and adapting to intuitive surrender, rather than um, grasping or projecting an idea of what I think should be happening. So to me, in that case, it's been allowed me to connect with my own sense of like power and freedom. And I know that people are with me and are showing up because they truly want to be, rather than it's part of a like a corporate role that like, oh, you're supposed to be there at like my beck and call and like drop things, or like even if you don't have the capacity or resonance with it. So deep bonding and partnership can still coexist in a paradigm beyond like codependent social, conditioning around love. um, yeah, so that's part of my response. Um, but yeah, I think in our course as well, we're gonna dive deep into like how all of this information translates to our lived experiences, and where are we, um, and it's about consenting to our frameworks, consenting to our beliefs around love and what resonates, and like it doesn't have to. Ours doesn't have to be the same, but it's a matter of like looking at all of our programs around our beliefs around love and being like, okay, like, do I consent to this? How did this get here? Like, if I had to choose, what I want this year? And so going back to your beautiful poem, like reclaiming our sense of choice, and how that can shift over time, and how that ties into un- digging out, like where empire has projected certain ways of relating that, do things like reinforce the nuclear family over the village, because if we're sharing things and we're taking care of one another, we don't need to have six individual vacuum cleaners. We can just share one, and then we're not feeding into huge industries that benefit off of our suffering and our feelings of lack and unnecessary consumerism. So we'll go deeper into how all those things are interconnected. But I also I would love to turn it back to you as well, and ask you what your neurodecolonization journey has looked like as it applies to relationships, like even in, these frameworks and beliefs, including your relationship with yourself, which, you've spent a lot of time cultivating, and I really admire that. Yeah.
You always like to put me on the spot by asking me about my relationships. I swear to God, I should just be prepared for it at this point. Um, once again, still chewing on all of that. Holy shit. I just listened to it and take notes that time.
Hmm.
Me and relationships, like actually, like since you asked that question, I like really sat with like why I felt so dysregulated talking about that. And I realized I was like in the middle of processing a lot of my relationships because this year was the first year that which is crazy because it was also one of the hardest years where I kind of opened myself up to allowing new people to come into my circle because I've curated like my inner circle to be so precise and so like I'm confident that everyone that I consider in that inner circle will be there in my lives in whatever capacity that we're in whatever rhythm that we flow in for the rest of my life. And when I have that security, and then I also have found like a deep peace within myself because have had so much relational trauma that I've had to turn to self. And that's also like the Quechuan way, that I didn't realize I was receiving when I was in the Sacred Valley of Peru in 2017, receiving and being gifted medicine. Was like, everything. Everything was within you. You need to love yourself before you can even begin to love anyone else. And I didn't want to hurt anybody along the path, so I chose celibacy and being single until I was so myself that I wouldn't lose myself in relationship. And there was a couple of times I tried and lost myself in a 2 year intimate partner violence, domestic violence situation, unfortunately, due to being a part of what I call white supremacy culture that actually taught me that abuse and gaslighting and what I call light supremacy, which is white supremacy wrapped in medicine and psychedelics, to accept abuse as love, which is just recapitulation of empire, right? Which I call white supremacy, the cultural normative of spirituality or what I call algorithmic religion and empire. So ultimately, like, to understand attachment theory and to be able to name my disorganized attachment and to also do parts work where I named like the part of me that you can label as a self-saboteur, or like the younger version of me that comes out and is really sassy and is like the Scorpio stinger and will fuck you up if you fuck with them type of thing. And when I was able to name all of that, I was able to like really move from like a disorganized attachment, or recognize when that anxious attachment was coming out or I was being avoidant, and name it and work through it somatically. So I deprogrammed my attraction to abusive narcissistic relationships, to really finding attraction to reciprocity, to like what you describe as like something I think is very mycelial, and something that's going to be a common theme in how we discuss and mirror things here. And it's like a mycelial relationship thing, and I've experimented with poly along the way, and it influences even like um how I relate and see love, that like relying on one person to be everything for you when you should be everything for yourself, and like you guys should just be able to come together and explode in this like epic creative like flow kind of way. That doesn't come without devotion to spiritual excavation of empire from your nervous system, you know. And I think I, listening to you, and I bought the book finally. I had my other poly friends like, "You need to read Poly. Why is it poly secure?" Like a lot of people. I finally did it, and everything you say though is really validating of my path. And I think I'm really proud of myself because I'm on my way. I'm not only just not on my way, but I really am in it, working on really embodying and expanding with secure attachment in all my relationships, and to approach things from a relationship anarchy, because my friendships have been way more sustainable than my romantic and sexual pursuits. So um that's what I got for you.
Mm. So many great points around, yes, like ending on that note, like it's around deconstructing this hierarchy um, of how we cherish and care for relationships and like, build lives with one another. And, for at this point, yeah, like labels to describe relationships, but like friendships, whether or not they have romantic and sexual components, or like realizing that like um loving people and letting that flow and honoring them regardless of what label we're told to put on them. And I love that you brought up parts work as well. That's been really key. And I feel like my parts work has advanced all the further because I can nourish and validate and experience mirroring in a multiversal way, because I'm experiencing different types of intimacy and depth of intimacy simultaneously in ways that were compartmentalized like vertically across my lifespan that are now happening horizontally. And I look forward to expanding on um, consciousness and releasing mononormativity, and also what you said about this like this sabotaging, like we can I want to push back a little and say, like, looking at when I've spent time with some of those parts, understanding, not blaming myself or that part of myself for the toxic environment that they had to survive in. So what does it look like to extend gratitude towards that part in real time, to be like, wow, like once again you're working to keep me safe, or like and how, similarly with CPTSD, looking at those parts as frozen in time, and how do you like show. I used to do this form of therapy where I'd show those parts documentary versions of where I'm like, okay, see, here's where we are now. We are adults with resources and agency, and how do I build trust with them, as myself with a capital S, to say, like, hey, you can trust me to look out for you so we don't have to employ these tactics. And we are going to engage in relationships where it's not necessary to do this in order to feel seen and heard or express our needs. And I think that's where it ties back to the secure self-attachment, ourselves as our primary attachment figures, and how that transforms how we relate across the board, and that transforms what is alive in our like default mode network, and how we process information, and how we don't need anyone else to like deeply feel. We do need people, but not in ways that cause us to or lead us to self-abandonment, where we can have that balance. So I'm excited to continue expanding on these concepts, and I want to bring us to this concept of world building, and what it means to render these systems obsolete on the interpersonal level, the societal level, and beyond, and what that looks like in a practical and accessible way. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Not, I'm serious, not many people render me speechless, but you do, constantly. Well, it kind of reminds me of, not kind of, it reminds me of your work, with that graphic you created with secure attachment across the across the sociological, yeah, that one. Can't say it
Yeah.
right now, but
Socio-ecological,
thank you.
public health science.
Words are hard. English is hard. But I think like that's what it brings up to me and for me, and I love for you to like explain this graphic.
Secure attachment across the socio-ecological model. I'm so glad you asked. So um, as you can see here, there's interpersonal at the center, interpersonal, communal, societal, and existential. And as I have been working through everything in Poly Secure and the Poly Secure workbook, which happens to be right here, looking at all of these components are really necessary for well-being and expansion. And on my healing journey, as I've healed my relationship with myself, it happened simultaneously as I was experiencing communal secure attachment, which I experienced for the first time at this festival called Dance Beyond, an ecstatic dance festival. And I realized when multiple people around me were behaving in a securely attached manner, which was attuned and open and curious and compassionate, it expedited my own journey of treating myself that way. And I found myself really like ease into presence and expansion. And, I have so much trauma communally, with leaving,
Real real quick though, so
yeah,
tap can we walk through a somatic practice with that experience? And I call it pocketing.
yeah.
All right, so if you wouldn't mind just like tapping back into that experience, like and envision your environment, like the smells, the sounds, like what's around you. You can describe it out loud too if you want for our podcast listeners.
So my first experience of communal secure attachment.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was actually um, I went to the bathroom because I was crying, um, and someone came out of the stall behind me, and I didn't know her, and she offered me a hug. It was really kind, and I just remember feeling such relief, and like,
And
yeah, I just felt
where did you feel that? Where in your body?
um,
If you could pinpoint it.
in in my chest and my shoulders. I just felt so safe and so relieved, um, in that moment.
And like, does it take any shape or like, does it have any colors to it?
Mm. It's like I'd say it's like a warm, like yellow glow, and it's kind of like a swirling orb surrounding me.
Any sensations or anything notable about that feeling that you felt after that hug?
Um, sensation of like I felt like I could breathe bigger. Um, and I felt really grounded. Yeah.
Somatic's so cool. So then, something about pocketing is like you pocket that feeling, like put it in your pocket so you can reference it.
Mm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to like, cause that's the somatic part of it, of like approaching is like, oh, how do like I think a lot of the times like that empire is so manipulative about is its repetitive manipulation, and it's figured that out. That's why gambling, that's why social media is scrolling, because it produces dopamine hits and addiction, and that way. And so like if we understand that it's through patterning and through repetition and iteration, this practice of pocketing will help you create repetition so you can recognize when something is securely attached or when someone has their own secure attachment versus when someone's coming in, with disorganized and, all the levels of like avoidant and anxiousness that exists, because sometimes
Mm.
you can't tell the difference because it can be so convoluted with the manipulation of empire and the constant social codes that we're receiving, to not make decisions that don't recapitulate dirty pain, as Resma Menakem calls it. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, I just
Mm.
like thanks for walking through that exercise with me. And I think like where we can conclude is like we hope that this space, and like we're going to explore different topics, like in our notes we were supposed to talk about transformative justice and a bunch of other things, but I think this leaves us at a really great place of this is what we're creating here with Compost and Empire, is that we want to really render empire obsolete. And Rev Angel Kyoto Williams once again says that the only way to do that is to have creative conversation, on ramping conversations, to have creative solutions. And I think that today's exploration through relationship and building secure attachment and like that, all those theories and all this different parts that come up through therapeutic work and medicine work and relationshiping, um really is rich with like nutrients that's going to like feed our soil from the compost of this dying empire as we witness its collapse. And I just like also really want to like take a moment and center you, Gina, and your work and your perspective and like how you engage with the world. It's really admirable, and I'm just like constantly in awe like every time you open your mouth, and I look forward to continue offering such epic things to the world together. And yeah, any concluding thoughts you got for us?
Um, Thank you so much for that exercise and for holding space. And I want to quickly say that we're taught that love is butterflies in our stomach. We're taught that anxiety um, can be a sign, and jealousy are signs of love. And I think that rewiring our bodies to this security, and to, as you were saying, like downloading this feeling and recognizing it and having that attunement and that wisdom of both mind and body coming together in heart space, is so key to self-protection, and resilience, um, and how we can be powerful mirrors for one another. So thank you for being a mirror for me, and yeah, I'm so excited for next week and all the things that we're working on. Looking forward to hearing thoughts and for folks joining us. And thank you for um, yeah, these powerful ideas that are creating this expanded weaving and integration that I hope can thread together all these different fields and do this like radical interdisciplinary work that we have the creative freedom to do here. So.
And I think this like leads me to announce something super exciting, and that's our 3-part series workshop called Neurocolonization 101. And we've created like a 3-part curriculum that's going to be super dialogical based, because that's a really important part of our pedagogy, is to have you all interact and dialogue with us around this concept. Eugene going to be offering one workshop where we're going to really dive into like how to recognize love through unwinding neurocolonization. And for me, I'd say not to sabotage it, but through attachment and all that fun stuff. And then the last one, we're working on having an epic guest, and we're going to be talking about tapping into our ancestral technologies. All information to register and to join is live. Check out our Instagram at Compost _ the Empire, and subscribe also to our Substack to get more information, and register and sign up now. Where scholarships are definitely available. So if you need a scholarship, go ahead and DM us or drop a comment in the comments, and we'll DM you more information. But yeah, I'm really excited because that's exactly what we're here to do at Compost the Empire, is to continue to explore in all the aspects of our lives, in the multidimensionality that we get to interact with the world, and to like really let go of this empire so that we can advocate for a better world. And with that being said, I think that we should close this portal up and make sure we send our gratitudes out. So thank you to our ancestors, to our guides, to Pachamama, to Father Cosmos, and to the Wonka Tonka, to the Great Intelligence. Thank you to the Winged Ones, to the Four-Legged Ones, to the Waters, to the Four Elements, and the seven intergalactic directions. Thank you to all of our teachers and all of the freaking books that have guided us to this point, in this moment. And with that, all my relations, aho. And thank you for joining us. We look forward to having you tune in next week for episode 2, which is going to be about, I think we're diving into attachment theory like hardcore. Yeah, this
Yes.
one's up again. You're welcome, world. All right, y'all.
Let's
Happy
fucking rock.
holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you for tuning in and listening to today's episode. We are deeply grateful for you all. If this podcast has given you language, resonance, or a place to breathe, consider supporting the ecosystem through our Substack.
Think of it less as a subscription and more as Mycelial economics, small distributed support that allows for this body of work to keep growing without being distorted.
Every investment helps sustain the writing, workshops, courses, retreats, the podcast, and more of the shared space we are building together. We're also open to sponsorships from brands, collectives, and businesses that feel genuinely aligned with our values.
That means organizations rooted in care, repair, dignity, and relationship, not extraction, greenwashing, or proximity to empire. So if you're building something that supports people, land, culture, or imagination in real ways, and you want to support independent media that tells the truth slowly and responsibly, we'd love to hear from you.
You can reach out through the contact information in the show notes.